everyone and welcome back to the Colour Cave where we like to play with art stuff. My name is Gem and today we are tackling our latest Upcrate battle, which is from the August Upcrate. If you haven't seen the unboxing video, I shall leave a link to it in the end card so you can watch it after this and also down in the description too. Just before we make a start, I am still battling the same headache from the other day. This is day 4, so I'm not firing on all cylinders. Also, I want to say a really quick hello to Elspeth. Somebody left me a comment under one of my videos saying that they are in Australia and their mum doesn't get to visit them anymore, and she is from Ayrshire, which is where I was born. So I just want to say hello to you, Elspeth. I hope everything over in Ayrshire is wet and warm as usual, and I hope you're doing okay. Okay, so let's talk about the Upcrate battle. The challenge this month is drawing vegetables, and I was absolutely over the moon to have been given these Derwent Lightfast pencils. These are really expensive pencils. They're very nice, they're very high quality, and I've used them once before. I've actually already got some of these pencils, so I know what I'm in for, and I was really excited to get going. So initially, after doing that first video where I swatched out all these colours, I had an idea in my head straight away about what I wanted to draw, but I try not to jump to conclusions and I try and take my time and think about these things when I'm doing these as a separate video. So I consulted my best friend, who's a great lover of vegetables, not an artist, and she said straight away the thing that I had in my head, so I knew at that point that's what we were doing. So we're going to get cracked on now and just get started. I will be editing out quite a lot of this video because working in coloured pencil is a very slow, methodical process. So I will tell you what I'm doing, but I'm not going to make you sit through every single pencil stroke because this video would end up about 2.5 hours long, and we don't want any of that. Nobody got time for that these days. So we're working here on this Portofino paper. The pencils seem to go down quite nicely on this, so I'm looking forward to that as well. So we'll just want to get started with an initial sketch. I did do some rough sketches just in my sketchbook and I didn't use this pencil, so it'll be interesting to see how this fares in comparison to what I've already done. Okay, so as always, I'm going to start out with just a really light sketch outline. The only other thing I'm employing here is my kneaded eraser. There is an eraser on the end of the pencil, but it's quite hard, and just bearing in mind that this is watercolour paper. Now I know it's smooth, it's hot pressed, but I don't want to compromise the integrity of the texture of the paper by using a heavy eraser. If I do need to make any amendments, I'll probably use my kneaded eraser, and if you don't own one of these, I highly suggest that you get one because they're really cheap and they're great. Okay, so they have a very specific vegetable in mind, and that is something that we here in the UK call an aubergine. Now I know that if you're in other parts of the world, it's sometimes referred to as an eggplant. So I'm just using very basic shapes here. I've got a couple of circles and a little sort of cap shape here, and that's going to form the basis of what we're going for. Just sort of join these up and smooth them out. Now, I don't want these lines to be too perfect, and it's something I'm going to talk about in a bit more detail in some of my up-and-coming drawing tips for beginners videos. Basically, you don't want a perfectly smooth, uniform shape because it makes for a very uninteresting vegetable. If you've got a little bit of imperfection in there, that's actually helpful at this stage. So I'm just taking out all these rough sketch lines in the middle here because I don't need them. And this is the great thing about these kneaded erasers, you just need a really light stroke and it'll lift most of your graphite if you have kept your pressure quite light when you're sketching. So there's my aubergine there, but I'm also going to have two like little slices here. So again, just really roughly to begin with. Now I just want to add a little bit of detail up here where this stalk is as well. Just sort of make this a bit more realistic and a bit more sort of organic looking. Now you can see my line down here is quite dark, so that's one of the ones that I really want to lighten up. I'm going to lighten up the entire sketch though, but I need to pay specific attention here because I've gone over this quite a lot, and that's exactly the kind of thing that's going to muddy up our lovely coloured pencil. So really what I'm doing here is not dissimilar to what you would do when you're doing like an underdrawing for like a watercolour paint or any kind of painting for that matter. I'm going to do the detail and the work with the coloured pencil as if it was a graphite pencil. Okay, so the colours that we've got, again, just a quick rundown. Foliage, which is a nice earthy green colour. I've got yellow ochre, I have magenta, I have mallard green, which is more of like a teal stroke viridian colour. I would say it's more green than blue. I've got a violet pencil, and I've also got this mid ultramarine, which is a really nice sort of delicate sky blue colour. So that's what we're going to be working with, and I will be using every single colour. I'm going to work right to left. These are oil-based pencils, but because they're quite soft as well, they are quite smudgy. So if you're going to work with them and you are a messy worker, it might be an idea to put something down under your hand just to stop you smearing the colour across. I'm going to try and be careful. Oh, famous last words. So I'm starting here with this yellow ochre pencil, and I'm going to work on the stalk and these leaves first, and then I'm going to carry on across this way. So the first thing that I am going to do is pop down a really light layer of this yellow ochre over the entire area. Now the idea here is we're going to build up lots of layers, and we're going to layer up different colours on top of each other. And what that helps you do is just get some nice sort of variation in the depth and the tones that are in the actual item that we're working on, bearing in mind that we only have these 6 pencils to work with. So now I'm going to jump in with my foliage green and just start placing the lines down where the darkest part is. Now I'm going to have a light source coming roughly from this direction, just so that you're aware of that. So you can see I've got a very definitive line there. And then after that I'll start working down here. So I'm keeping a really light pressure, and at this point it doesn't really matter whether or not my pencil is sharp. You're probably better actually not having a sharp pencil at this point. Now I'm just going to go over this entire area that I've covered in yellow with this foliage green as well, really, really lightly. I'd also like to point out as well that I haven't used a reference image for this. This is just, obviously I know what an aubergine looks like. I cook with them quite often, so I've just taken this straight out of my head. And I'm just keeping this as light as I possibly can for now. Okay, so now that I've got some base colour down and it's kind of brought the shape out of what we're drawing, I'm going to start concentrating. And I like to work on the darkest areas first. A lot of people prefer to do it the other way around, but I find it easier. So just even on this stalk here, I can start with this, and on this right hand side, this is curved, so it's going to be a lot darker. Now I'm not pressing hard here, and I just really want to sort of really emphasise that. All I'm doing is building up layers in certain areas to darken it down, because if you press down, then you're then preventing yourself from putting any further layers down. So I'm going to use this mallard green as like a darker sort of shadow pencil, and again, because we're layering up here, it's not going to come out really, really bright if we layer it with the other green. Just put in a few lines of interest here as well. And then just layer this foliage green back over the top to mute down the sort of more bluey tones in the mallard green, because we don't want a blue stalk. That's not what we're aiming for here. And lastly, I'm going to take the violet colour, and I'm just going to use that to really darken down what we're doing here. At the risk of repeating myself over and over, the key to doing anything with coloured pencil like this, especially if you're going for like a more detailed drawing, is to not press hard and just build up layers of your different colours. What I tend to think of is having like a base colour. So my base colour for this section is the foliage green. That's the overall colour I'm using. So in between each layer of whichever coloured pencil I'm using, whether it's the violet or the ochre, it doesn't matter. I go back over it with a layer of this foliage green, because that is the primary colour that we're going for. And I don't mean that in the sense of the actual primary colours, I mean for this specific section of the drawing. Thinking about the light source again, this side of this leaf's going to be really dark. So I want to start building up some of this foliage green to start with. One of the things that I do find quite often is that I lose a sort of defined edge of my drawing when I'm layering up these pencils. Because we're going very softly, I end up with a sort of like a fuzzy blurred outline. So every now and then you will see me just going down that outline and sort of putting it back in, as it were. So that's something that I've noticed, especially with these pencils for some reason. But you want to do it without creating a defined line, because then it looks like you're going into like an illustrative technique and you're putting an outline on your drawing, and I don't want that for this. So in starting to build up this foliage green, I am leaving it quite patchy, and that's so that we've got a little bit of variation and definition in sections of the leaves, because the leaves, when you've picked an aubergine, eventually they start to dry out and sort of crinkle up a little bit. This bit down here might be dark if that's curling up like that. So again, in certain sections on the side where the light source is, I'm going in here with the yellow ochre. I'm not always completely technically correct when, you know, when I'm talking about a light source and doing this, but I always think that if you can give the general impression of what's going on, people's brains and eyes will finish the story for them, so it doesn't always have to be absolutely technically correct. But I tend to be quite relaxed when I'm doing stuff like this and just kind of go with the flow, see what happens. So I'm going to have a really dark part in here. So straight away I'm going to grab that mallard green again. And that's more just an indicator to me so that I don't forget that it's meant to be like that. This isn't what it's going to look like, as it were. Okay, so I'm just going to work away and build up some layers here now. I'm not going to do anything special. I'm literally just going to jump between this foliage green and the yellow ochre. So I'll cut some of this out and I'll catch you up in a little bit. Okay, so you can see this is the kind of depth I'm going for, and that was probably another 7 or 8 layers of pencil on top of what I already have. Okay, so this is starting to look a bit more leafy now, and I just wanted to come back in at this leaf that's kind of like curled up round because I'm going to use a lot more yellow here. So I thought that might be a bit more interesting than just going over the same bit over and over. So I'm taking a second layer of this yellow ochre again, just very light-handed though, nothing crazy. Someone did mention in the comments that this prompt would fit in well with the series of watercolour paintings I'm doing of animals that are fruits, and maybe I should incorporate some vegetables. I'm not going to do that, however it did spark an idea for my next fruit animal that I'm going to do, and I'll probably paint that and post it over on my Instagram if anybody wants to see what it is, because we'll have to go through the naming ceremony obviously. And I love that you guys suggest names for all my drawings, it's so good. So again, working more with the yellow and the foliage green here rather than the foliage and the mallard. I don't even know if they're actually called leaves, to be honest, do you know that? I'm not entirely sure on that one. Okay, so just a wee scoop of the mallard here. So now we want to move on to the main part of the aubergine. Naturally, this violet pencil is absolutely perfect for this. Very, 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 very gently. And all I'm going to do is go around my outline ever so lightly. And that's just to give me a starting point. And I'm going to skip out the slices for now. I'll get to them later. So there's the bottom edge. And basically just the same thing again. The primary colour for this is obviously purple. So with this violet pencil, now I do have quite a sharp point, so I'm going on the side here. Now, one of the really nice things about aubergines is that they're very smooth and they can be very shiny. So when I'm going over this main section, I'm going to skip out a slither that runs down in a slight curve like this to follow the shape of the aubergine, and that's going to be my highlight. So down the bottom here, I don't have to be too careful when I'm putting down this initial layer. Now, it doesn't matter how tidy this layer of pencil is, you're going to be going over it so many times, it's not really of any consequence how. Obviously you don't want dirty, great big bold strokes in it, but don't be too concerned if you're doing this and you get, you know, some pretty scribbly looking lines. It's a-okay, it'll be fine. And again, I'm using the side of my pencil and I'm holding my pencil right back at the end here, and that's just to help with guiding my hand and also making sure I don't press too hard, because we don't want any harsh outlines. And that is not a mistake, it's not a mistake, but it's something that I see a lot of new artists doing when they first start to learn to draw. They draw this thick outline around everything, and if you look at anything in real life, nothing has a thick black line around it, or a thick purple line for that matter. So that's something just to be aware of if you're doing this type of drawing. And I would say, I wouldn't say it's realism, but it's semi-realism. So I'm thinking about the light source, and I think the light's going to kind of follow the shape of our aubergine. So if I bring this bottom part up, I have to decide how wide I want the highlight to be. That's obviously just completely down to preference. And I'm bringing this purple up around this bottom side because that helps to show the curvature rather than just having the highlight as a straight line straight across. Now in here and at this top section, It's going to be really dark in here because it's hiding underneath the leaves. So that's an area where we can really work away and be very confident in our layers that we're putting down in one thing and another. So I can start to sort of join that up to this part that I've been adding the layers down the bottom. Now again, just to darken this down, we've got a couple of options as to what we can use, and this mallard green pencil, with it being quite a dark colour, that's going to be really helpful. And that sounds counterintuitive almost, you know, putting a green on top of a purple, but once you've got the layers there, you can sort of blend it in and merge it in with your purple so it doesn't look odd. And I'm going to show you what I mean up here, so I'm just going to put a little bit more down. A little bit more violet down first. Make this section nice and dark. So if I take this mallard green now and very lightly and in a circular motion, if I pop that down around the line of this leaf here, now it looks as if it's just blending in, but you can see it's taken on a blue shade already. And if we go back over this with our violet, now I've gone to a medium pressure here because what I want to do is I want to get that contrast in between the body of the aubergine and the leaf. So right in against where the line is of the leaf, I'm pressing quite hard. But what I'm doing is I'm putting that line in and then going straight back to my circular motions to feather it out so I don't have that cartoon line we've been talking about. So now you can see there's a very distinct line from where the leaf finishes and the aubergine starts. And then I can just start to build up this colour in here and make this nice and rich. So when I'm coming into this section, it is hidden under the leaf, but it's not going to be as severe as it is up in that corner. So I'm going to start to incorporate a little bit of this magenta in here. And these pencils make it so easy to use these layering and blending techniques. Like super, super easy. Okay, so as I come up now, I'm starting to work towards this highlighted area that we talked about. And what I want to do is graduate the colour there to create the fact that the shape is smooth, and although it's very shiny, there is still going to be a transition between where the highlight's hitting and the colour of the aubergine. So what we're going to do there, this is where we're going to utilise our ultramarine pencil, and what I want to do is create a gradient, a very gentle and soft gradient between this mid ultramarine, the magenta, and then eventually into the violet. So I'm just going to show you a little bit of that first of all. The area that I've mapped out with my violet is going to be my guideline here, and I haven't sharpened this pencil at all. I've actually kept it quite blunt, and that's just because we're going for really soft colour here. I'm not touching the areas where I've put the violet down, but I'm just going inside that little circle, if you like, and I'm just going to work my way around. And what that lets me do is mark out the part that's going to be just the white of the paper, and then I can decide where that intermediate part's going to be. So like I do in most of my videos, and the people that watch regularly, you'll know that you'll be very familiar with this, I like to put these, I call them markers or guidelines down on the paper, just so that I can map out where the colours are going, and then when I go to start working on a section, I'm confident that I know which pencils are going where. Now this is going to come down a bit in here because of the shape of the vegetable. Okay, that's a bit better, I'm a bit happier there. So what we're doing here now is this is where we're going to join the magenta and the violet together. So my magenta's here, so I can start bringing that down into this violet section that we've already done. So I'll bring it to about there, that's as good a place as any, and just start building that up. So you are going to see that sort of pinky colour starting to really show up the more layers you put down, obviously. And I can jump between that and the violet here. So we're starting to work on these magenta layers now. Now on the main part of this aubergine, I will be using the Lyra blender when we get to that end point. It's not something that I would normally use, but I figured it's supposed to be in the box, so we'll use it. And now I'm just going to do what I did before, and I'm going to work away on these darker sections. And basically I'm just trying to knit everything together now. And I just want to tidy up. This is what I was talking about earlier, about having this sort of feathery line, and that's what started to happen. And then work it into the rest of this. Okay, so thinking more about the magenta now, we're going to start to press a little bit harder and really blend that and work it in. And you can see the difference that one patch has made already, and that's me just pressing a little bit more heavily. And this is literally just a case of working away at this. You've got to have patience for pencil. And I know a lot of people really struggle with that aspect of it because it takes forever to do anything in pencil. And I think I've been at this about 45 minutes. And that's fairly quick for something like this. But obviously I'm kind of used to doing this. This is my thing. So now when we come up to the top of this highlighted area here, this is where our ultramarine, mid-ultramarine, yeah, comes back into play. So I just want to do the same with the ultramarine and the magenta as I did with the magenta and the violet. And I'm just going to sort of pull that down into there. And then as I get towards this white section, like feathery light touch. So hopefully you can see now, you can start to see where the curvature is in this. Now up in this section here, it's going to be quite similar to what's going on here, but just not quite as dark. Okay, so I hope you can see where we're going with this now. I'm going to continue on and I'm going to finish this bottom section here so that you'll be able to see how we're working that in all the way along, and we can pick up after that. Okay, so I've done a fair bit of work now and you can see how this is coming along. One of the things that's, well, it's not concerning me. One of the things that I'm keeping an eye on is the fact that you can see here in this centre section, you can still see quite a lot of the texture of the paper poking through. Now, I happen to like that in pencil drawings, and it's one of the reasons I enjoy pencil, but that's not for everyone, and that's kind of the whole point of having one of these blender pencils. I'm not sure how effective that's going to be in smoothing this out, because we want to get that illusion of this really smooth and shiny aubergine, so that's going to be quite experimental for me, but we'll try that out when we get there. And this is what I think is so magical about coloured pencil. Here's me sitting colouring in an aubergine and I'm using literally a teal green pencil. And I just think it's wonderful, and that's why I love pencils so much. And it's so nice to have a subscription box where I get to express that joy and that, you know, my favourite part of arting. So it's maybe not going to be the same round here because this section's a little bit higher up, because obviously we've got this slice here. So I'm going to skip that for now, and I'm going to start down in this corner here until I decide how far up I want to bring this, because I'm not sure that I want to go that far up. Again, if I bring this round a little bit here, we're just helping out with the idea that this is really quite curved. So I'm going to move on to this top section now, and really I want to be keeping the darker shades away because this is obviously the side that the light source is coming from. I do still want to use the purple though, but it's just going to be very, very light. And I want to keep that really light there. Here we can really make a judgment on how big we want this highlight to be. I think the way it is a bit extreme. This must be a really shiny aubergine. So I think we can cut it down a little bit. So all we're going to do is we're basically going to give the highlight a haircut with our coloured pencils. So I've got, as I said, I'm going to use this magenta more here. And all I'm going to do is start sort of encroaching on this highlighted space. And I really want to come down a bit in here, and again it's just to show that there's a slight curvature in the actual vegetable itself. I'm finding the word vegetables a lot easier to use than aubergine, I don't know why. Okay, so that's looking a bit better. It's still quite fat though, but by the time I put my blue back in, because obviously I've gone down into the area that I'd coloured with my blue pencil before, so I'm going to start again with this blue in the white section, and I want to bring this in to about there. So that's looking a bit better. So again, we're just talking about layering pencil. So although I'm using the magenta, I'm popping in a layer of this violet pencil because the subject matter is an aubergine, which is purple. Now really at this stage, I'm not really in for technique now. I'm just doing this by eye and what my preferences are now that the sort of bare bones of it are down, and I can see how things are going to turn out if I keep using the colours in the manner that I'm doing just now. Now going back in with this blue again, and this was just the same reasoning as before. I still feel that there's too much of a highlight at this bottom part. I feel like this needs to come in a bit. Okay, I'm fairly happy with that for the time being. I think it's still quite an exaggerated highlight, but I kind of like it. And it looks a lot more severe on the camera than it does in real life. It's just to do with the light balance. So I'm just going to go down to these slices now, and these are going to be slightly different, and this is going to be kind of the fun part. Obviously, the prompt was drawing vegetables. So what I want to do here is I'm going to add in a pencil here. And I'm going to leave this section of the slice unfinished as if it's mid-drawing. I just thought that would be a little bit of fun and kind of tie in better with the prompt. The ironic thing about doing this, when I was practicing, you know, when I did like a rough outline sketch, I've realised that I never draw pencils, which is funny, and that I need to up my pencil drawing game, and in the literal sense, not as in the skill sense, which is just a bit weird. So for the middle section of our aubergine slices, I'm going to start off with this yellow ochre. And then I'm going to take the good old foliage green, just start to like add in a little bit around the edge here. Because again, they're usually a slightly different colour where the main part meets the skin. And again, thinking about the light source, this part here is going to be lightest, so we can bring the green a bit further in on this side if that's what we want. And they do have these little kind of like pip holes. That's not the technical description. I also need to be careful saying that word because my dog will come tearing through if I keep saying it. So they're like that's just 3 little simple lines, and then I can go back over this outside part with my yellow ochre. And then this bottom part here is going to be our slice, and I'm going to have a little highlight just on this edge here. So literally just a tiny dark edge on this side. I can blend these two together. So this is better zoom back in here so you can see what's going on. So this is very precision work. So just the same pattern as before. I've got my sky blue here. This is where it's going to start to get darker again as it curves round back in towards this other section. So you can see, even though I'm working in tiny sections, I'm still using that little circular scribbly motion. That's called scumbling for anybody who wants to know the official term. It does actually have a name, which I think it's wonderful that there's a name for scribbles personally. And by using these circular motions, all we're doing is preventing us from having a build-up of colour in one specific area and then it looking as if it's been coloured in pencil. Obviously it has been, that was a silly thing to say, but you know what I mean. You don't have those deliberate pencil strokes that are really obvious. Okay, now that looks quite messy when you're this close up, but if I zoom out a bit, you can see that looks a bit more sensible. Okay, so on to this part now. So I literally just want to do this section here, and then we're going to draw in our pencil. So I'm going to leave my sketch lines there because that's quite a nice sort of touch, and they are really light, so they're not taking over the entire picture. So just as before, in this top section here, I'm going to start with this yellow ochre, but I'm just going to fade it out to practically nothing, just underneath the line of the aubergine. Then we can have a tiny bit of this green here. I'm very aware, see, as I'm sitting doing this, I'm aware that I have talked incessantly since I've started this, and I'm going to have a hard job editing this video down because obviously this is just a subject that I'm really passionate about and I really enjoy. So I'm sorry for that. If this video ends up being a lot longer than the usual sort of half hour, 40 minutes, then I'll do my best to try and shorten it down. Because I feel as if I'm kind of giving a tutorial here rather than, just doing a challenge. But you can let me know. I'd like some feedback on that. That'd be great. Bring this purple in. And then this is where I'm just going to finish it like this. And then we're going to draw our pencil in here. So back to my HB pencil. And again, if I turn this round, this makes this a lot easier for me because trying to draw something really straight like a pencil, it's not the easiest job, truth be told. Now, I could actually just use an actual coloured pencil for reference here. That would probably be sensible. It's nice when you've got reference material right beside you. Okay, so I want to go just inside those lines. So again, same thing, I'm going to lighten this up. Okay, so obviously it's the purple pencil we're using, and we want to make sure that the core is given its true colour. So I'm going to press quite hard. Now, the interesting thing is when I hold this pencil up to the light, there is a reflection on it, which That's interesting, and I don't know how I'm going to squeeze it in here, but I am going to try my little hardest. So let's see what we can do here. I'm not making any promises. Well, blow me over. I didn't think I was going to manage that. Goodness me. I think the key to doing this kind of thing is just to have a really sharp pencil. So we want a kind of, yeah, we're going to have to differentiate between this wooden part of the pencil and then the sort of lacquered casing. What we need to do is I'll maybe add in a tiny bit of magenta down here. See, this is really pale, but I don't want to lose the shape of the pencil. I might have to just draw that in there. Okay, so although we're still like a wood casing on this, we're going to have to, again, make sure that we differentiate between this lacquered part of the barrel and the sharpened part. And just to give me that differentiation, I'm going to add a tiny spot of this foliage green. Once again, foliage green to the rescue. And again, I'm just trying to put in like a shadow on this bottom side. Now, I want you to take a really good look at this because I'm about to start with this blender and I don't know how well this is going to go. This could actually ruin this picture, so please have a good look. Number one, this can get quite sore in your hands because you've got to press quite hard. Secondly, if you're working on a pad, take it off because you're pressing down really hard, you might dent into the sheet of paper underneath. So I'm going to turn this over onto the cardboard at the back. And if you're used to using blenders, you'll know you always make sure that you clean it off before you start if you've been using it before so that you don't get any pigment transfer. And with this, you want to work from light to dark because all you're going to do is drag your dark colours and muddy up your highlights, which is what you don't want. So I'm just going to start. Where am I going to start? I don't know where to start. I'm going to start up here. And I'm actually on the white of the paper. And just as we did before, we want to use circular motions, but we want to press quite hard. And this, in theory, should just smoosh all the colour together. Now, obviously, if you want any sort of texture, it's not really very helpful, but if you want nice, clean, smooth colour, this is exactly what you want. So I'm just working my way around this sort of lighter area first of all. And as suspected, this isn't doing a whole lot, and that's kind of disappointing. It's leaving this really sort of streaky, horrible part. Anyway, I'm going to go into this darker part here and just see what happens. Okay, it's made a bit of a difference, not a huge amount, but okay. I'm actually not enjoying how much it's lightening up my colours as well. Not really what I wanted. It's not doing much on the blue, and it's probably because I don't have an awful lot of it actually on the paper. You know, I maybe needed to have a few more layers of that blue down for it to really, you know, for it to have anything to blend. Because with these blenders, all you're doing is moving the pigment about on the paper. Right, just for comparison here, I've actually got a Derwent blender handy. I didn't realise I had one right beside me. So I'm going to do this little section here with this Lyra blender. And then I'm going to use the Derwent blender just to show you if there's any difference. We'll see if there's any difference. I feel as if, I mean, like, you do have to work hard with these blending pencils. There's no two ways about it, but I feel as if I'm having to work really hard, like super hard. Okay, so you can see it has smoothed it out, especially here. It's quite obvious here. Right, so here's the Derwent blender now. And it does feel much drier and chalkier, like straight away when I've got them side by side like this. But even in that one section there, and I hope you can see that, if I zoom in even more, you can see how much of the texture of the paper has disappeared. This is the Derwent part here compared to over here with the Lyra blender. And it's left this just that little bit brighter as well. If I tilt it up, you maybe be able to see a wee bit better. So before I ruin anything else, I am just going to stick with this Derwent blender to finish this off. I feel as if I've spent a really long time on this and I don't really want to be dissatisfied with the outcome because of a pencil that I'm not that keen on. And technically, as far as the challenge goes, I have used it, so. And this is much easier. Like I'm able to blend this out so much quicker than I was with the Lyra blender. As I say, I just feel like with the Lyra one, I was having to work really hard there. And I mean, it was blending stuff out. There's no saying that it wasn't. It definitely was. But this Derwent blender's just, I think it's just like, it's a bit more efficient. If you can call a blender pencil efficient, I don't know. So one of the reasons, obviously, that I tend not to use a blender pencil is because most of you will know by now, I've got an old hand injury and it gives me motor skill problems with my hand, and I've got very little grip strength in my left hand now. And this is hard on my hand, and it's sore. I mean, it's hard on your hands anyway, like even if you don't have hand injuries. But this is an absolute killer, so that's another one of the reasons why I tend not to use them, and I actually just layer up my pencil to the point where I'm almost blending it with my last layer of coloured pencil and I don't have to go through this. So that has made a difference, and you can see it looks quite pretty. Okay, I'm just going to come back up here and see if I can do something with this. And yeah, even though I've done this with the Lyra blend, oh goodness me. Even though I've done this with the Lyra blender already, I'm able to go back over with the Derwent blender and it's still blending out. So that in itself tells a story. Yeah, I'm able to smooth that out way more. Right, I am going to call it quits at that, man. This has been epic. I'm just looking at the clock and I've actually been sitting here for 3.5 hours. That is more than enough time to spend drawing an aubergine in my opinion. Anyway guys, I want to thank you very much for watching. As I say, I've had a ball today and I hope you've enjoyed it too. I would love to hear your comments down below on what you've drawn, how you found these pencils and what you think to our aubergine here. Have a great day everyone. Bye for now.